Hi, this is my review of La Bataille de Hanau, October 30th to 31st, 1813. Published by Legion Wargames. It is part of an ongoing Napoleonic series of games, Viva l'Empereur. And if we have a look at the back of the box, it is a two-player game. I have successfully played it solo, which I'll be talking about. So they recommend this for 1 to 2 players. There's no AI, there's no bot you're playing against, you're literally playing both sides. The game complexity they class as medium. I actually think it's a little higher than that. I think medium is quite a broad category of complexity. I think it's the higher end of medium for me. Solitaire suitability, medium high, I would agree with that. And the unit size is at a regimental level. 1 strength point, 300 men. Map scales 200 meters per hex. The time it took to play the game, they're claiming sort of 2 to 8 hours. Yeah, my run through that I did an AAR for was comfortably sort of midway through that. So I think it took me a long evening to play through the game. So yeah, comfortably within that time frame. So first up, let's have a look at the rulebook. The rulebook, full colour. It is split into 2 sections really. There's the standard rules and the advanced rules. We'll have a quick look at those. It is quite a lengthy rulebook. It will take you a while to read through it a couple of times, and you will be using it extensively through the play. Certainly, if you're not familiar with the game series and this is your introduction to the game series, and I think this game is a great introduction to the series. So we've got 25 pages of the standard rules, and then all up, including everything, 36-page rulebook. The rulebook is well written. Certainly didn't have any problems with the rulebook in terms of understanding the rules. There are quite a few of them, and this is why I put it in the sort of the higher end of the medium complexity when playing with all the advanced rules. It's well written. It's nicely edited. Pass on it, and you can tell that it's an iterative process. You can tell that this rulebook's been around for a while and has been worked on extensively, no doubt, over the course of the life of this game series. And the one thing I would say with the rulebook, there are some mechanics that are probably easier to show actually on the board, but certainly the formation of the counter. So whether they're in, if you're talking about infantry with muskets, whether they're in line or column or square is super important. And then the orientation of the counter in the hex, so which it's facing in the hex, is also super important. We'll have a look at that on the board. Movement, combat, actually very straightforward. Not too complicated at all. What I would say, if you're familiar with Napoleonic type of war games, you'll be instantly familiar with a lot of the concepts in the game. So, and I took to them pretty quickly. I felt, but it did take me a couple of read throughs of the rulebook, and like I said, I did refer to the rulebook quite a lot through the play. It was more to make sure that I was getting certain rules correct. But it was it's a good rulebook to read, no two ways about it, and I enjoyed reading the rulebook very much. The one thing I would say, if there's one piece of advice I would give to the designer and the publisher, and whilst there are some examples of play, I probably would have liked a more of a rounded example of play. So maybe a turn, for example, even if it's a contrived turn, just to illustrate some of the mechanics. I think that's always a good way for the reader to help understand and solidify those rules. Now, how I personally, I've talked about this a lot in my videos, how I learn the game like this is just simply not by playing the game to begin with. It's simply put some counters on the board and do movement, do ranged fire, so artillery fire, do melee combat, do a cavalry charge, see how that works out, because different games have different mechanics for handling that. Do all the basic rounded principles of the Napoleonic warfare, and I found that worked really well for this game as well. It's definitely something I'd highly recommend. So overall, rulebook nicely done, a good read, quite an extensive read. It's a 30-odd page rulebook. Individually, none of the mechanics, I would say, barring one or two, I think, are too strenuous. I'll be honest with you. You know, movement, firing, morale, rallying, all these types of mechanics, charging the cavalry, forming squares, changing formation on your units are all quite straightforward. So we also have a La Bataille de Hanau special rule book. Now, what I liked about this was, one, it gives me a little bit of historical background, which is great. This is not a battle that I know a huge amount about in my historical reading and research that I've done. So that was great. But it's actually one of the things I like about it. It's not too lengthy. It's only 4 pages, and there's lots of war games I've got where the special rules specific to the battle I'm playing, it's almost like another rule book. And with this example, it's not like that at all. It really isn't. There's some important rules, especially around the setup. And I'll talk about the setup when we have a look at the map, I think. But there's not a huge amount, and I thought that was great because it means that I can focus on the core rules. I read through this rule book a couple of times, had it down there for reference, but actually there's not a lot in here that you're going to have to hold in your mind at all times. So I thought that was great. So you also get some player aids, and I'll talk about those as well. So terrain effects, very straightforward. You get a nice player aid for those. We'll have a look at the map in a minute, and I'll talk about the terrain. We also get a visual representation of those terrain types, and they're very straightforward. So the only thing that's to point out is difficult terrain compared to a forest. We'll have a look at the map. Reading of the units is really important, and I'll probably just show that on the map, I think, rather than talk about it too much here. Okay, then we have this. We have our turn track, and then we have this sort of how to describe this series of mechanics to do with morale and the army morale. I will be honest with you. I found this mechanic. It's one of the mechanics in the game that didn't quite gel with me, and it's almost quite hard even for me to explain how it works. But there are other war games that I've got that has a sense of the morale of the army as an army, as a larger thing, more than the sum of its parts, as it were. And in those games, when you're taking step losses, which is what this game does, when you're taking step losses, your morale of your army is affected, and it can have dire consequences. This game sort of uses a similar system, but it does require some bookkeeping. It does require you to refer into this player aid, and I will be honest with you, I would have preferred a little bit more of a streamlined process. There's a couple of games I've got in my head that I'm thinking about as I'm talking about this, and they have a much simpler, but effectively the same thing, but much more straightforward, and it's more visually represented on the map or as a chart, and I think I preferred that system. It's not to say I didn't like this. It's just I just found this a little bit clumsy. I will be honest with you. It's one of the few mechanics of the game that when I read through the rulebook, I was like, how does that work? And then playing it, I referred to it a few times, and then sort of chose to at times by playing solo, chose to choose to ignore it at parts. But if you're interested, it is there. It is detailed. It's an extra layer of mechanic on top. Then we've got our tables for our combat. So, and now these are actually very straightforward, which I was very thankful for. So the fire table, and I'll talk about how firing works, so how musketry and artillery works, and melee. Melee's definitely the more number crunchy of the two. I know some people like that. I quite enjoy doing a little bit of number crunching myself. So it's very good, very clear. As with all the player aids, nicely laid out. Very clear. For me, there was no ambiguity. I found them very usable during the game. So, yeah, great stuff. So this is the game board setup. Now I've just finished playing through the game, and I did a separate AAR video on that. So if you can watch that to see how my battle took part and how the sort of narrative worked itself out, which was a very enjoyable wargaming evening. I've left the game set up. I've slept on the game to gather my thoughts as to what I thought about it, what I liked about the game, and who I think the game is aimed at. So I've left it set up, and it's under plexi, so there's a little bit of glare. I do apologise for that. It's unavoidable when making videos like this. What I would say in terms of the map itself, let's talk about the map for a moment. Beautiful artwork, really nicely done. Quite a simple, elegant art style that's very reminiscent, very familiar to Napoleonic Wargamers. The artist has done many great maps that I've thoroughly enjoyed. So in terms of and the contents of the hex are very clear to me as having played it. What I would say on the map, that it is purely the hex and artwork. There's no player aids on the map. Doesn't probably need any, in fairness. And the map's quite large. Well, it's not large by wargaming standards by any stretch of the imagination, and it's a single map game. But the map is fairly sort of normal size. But you actually, what I found playing through the game, the actual playable space in reality is really just a section of the map. Hey, I have no problem with that. That is just the nature of the game. But it's not one of these games where you're playing the full length of the map or the full height of the map or anything like that. For the most part, you're playing in these sort of focused areas around this area here. Is how I found it. That's not to say you couldn't set up some what if scenarios. And there is a within the rule book, there is a second scenario which is a different setup, which would take part in a slightly different area of the map. What I'm trying to say is that the map, even though it's a normal sort of war game map, the actual reality of playing is I've got player aids on the map, etc. Because you don't need the whole physical map to play the game. So nice artwork on the map, very, very clear. Now, the one thing I want to talk about on the map, and if you go to the Board Game Geek page for the game, you'll see it's probably the biggest bit of feedback on the game. And it's a piece of feedback I agree with. And that is to do with the setup of the game. What you have, I have two pieces of feedback here on the game. Number one is that the game does not have hex numbers. So what the rulebook will tell you, it will tell you what counters to place on the map, and it'll give you sort of an idea of where to place them. So, for example, it may say, you put this counter on or near, 2 hexes away from B. So on B or 2 hexes away. And that's all well and good. But there are a couple of examples, and this is called out, a lot of people call this out, where it's a little vague, I will be honest with you, as to where you should put the counters. And personally, I didn't have too many problems with that, because I'm like, someone who's played a lot of war games for a long time, I'll be honest with you, if ever, I came across a little vagueness in the rule book, I will make a decision instantly and almost don't think anything of it, because I want to get on and play the game and enjoy the game and play through the narrative the game's going to give me. So, but I would call it out. There is just one or two occasions where it's a little vague as to where. That's the first thing. Now the second thing is, and this is one of those sort of things, once I saw it, I could never unsee it, is that instead of hex numbers, you have, the letters, so B and K and L, they're all on camera for the most part. And that's to help you set up. But they're really big. So, in terms of their physical size on the map, so I'll just hit the camera, in terms of their physical size on the map, they're really large, in some ways quite overbearing. And once I kind of laid all the counters out, once I started playing the game and they were moving about, that's all I could see then was these great big letters. And there's quite a few of them. And I was like, why are they so big? You don't need to make them that big. They could have been, a completely different, much smaller, much more sympathetic font size to the artistry of the map. I would have preferred that. It's a minor thing, but every time I look at the map now, all I can see is these great big red letters everywhere. That actually, I think there are other ways to help the player set the game up without needing those that I think would look better. There we go. That's what I thought. Didn't detract from the enjoyment of the game at all. It's just a little bit of feedback I would give. And like I would say, you've got to be a little bit patient with the setup, and there were one or two setup particulars where you're just going to have to make a decision and get on with it. Hey, no problem for me, but I can totally empathise with why people found that a little frustrating. So let's have a look at some of the counters themselves. So we've got here, we've got a line of infantry with muskets, for example, and here we've got some cavalry, some horse. Let's just put them more in the centre of the camera. That would be better, wouldn't it, Matt? So the actual counters, the gameplay counters, all have this sort of this formation, this orientation of size. So they're not square, and the two things that are really important for the game. One is they represent the formation, and secondly they represent the facing, if you will. So, for example, let's do the infantry first. This is a column. If I flip it over, now they're in line formation. So column, good for moving, good for melee combat. Line formation, good for firing. Rule of thumb. In fact, I've even done the facing wrong. The second thing is the facing in the hex changes depending on what formation it's. So when in column, face this way, towards this sort of vertices of the hex, and then when in line, moving this way. What it actually means is that you're forever, if you're changing formation of these counters a lot, you're forever sort of moving them about within the hexes, and when you're moving them, you have to sort of you pay movement costs, etc. You get some movement costs for free, but what it does, it gives a little bit more agency on the player. There's more stuff to do as the player. There's more things to think about. What formation are they in? Which way are they facing? What's the opponent facing? How do I get to the flank or to the rear, etc.? And that adds a great tactical element to the game, but it also adds a little bit more of just more mechanics and more rules, I suppose, for want of a better expression, to the game. It's one of the things I liked about the game, but it does mean, especially when you've got a lot of counters all in quite close proximity to each other, you've really got to be thinking about which way they're all facing and what formation they're all in, etc. And it adds that extra level of depth to the game. Therefore, a layer of decision making and a layer of tactical awareness when playing the war game, and that is extremely enjoyable. But it does have that. Now, the other thing I want to call out, and this is just a very personal thing, probably on my part, is that the actual numerics, the numbers, the values are very straightforward. There's quite a few of them, as you can see here. So we've got 4 sets of numbers, and the infantry have 5 sets of numbers. So these are all important numbers for the mechanics. So, the number of steps that the counter has, the melee ability, their movement, their morale, their ability for ranged combat. So that's why the horse don't have any, but the foot do, for example. That's all great. What I found playing the game was that my eyes could easily distinguish between foot and artillery and horse, but I couldn't really distinguish exactly what unit or what type of horse, for example, counter they were. So whether they were heavy or whether they were hussars or etc. That information, I'm sure it's there, but you kind of it's hard to sort of show on the camera. You've really got to look. And I found that I was playing a Napoleonics game at a tactical level with infantry, horse and artillery. But what type of horse they were, I couldn't have told you, I'll be honest with you. And I probably would have liked a little bit more of a visual language to tell me exactly just that extra level of detail, historical detail, that I would really have enjoyed. And it's partly because of more than anything, it's because of the orientation of the hex, the artwork that they have gone with for the counters themselves. That's not no problem for me whatsoever. It's more an observation. It's more a piece when I was playing the game, I was like, oh, are these lancers or are these hussars? Oh, I'm not sure. I'm going to have to stop and really put my glasses on and have a really look, and then go to the rulebook. And I kind of probably would have liked that information somewhere, some visual representation of that on the counters themselves, especially at quite a detailed Napoleonic tactical level. I would have liked that. But super interesting mechanics in this orientation, formations, orientation with the hex adds so much depth to the game. There are other Napoleonic games that do exactly the same sort of system. And I enjoy that extra layer of depth, but it does give an extra layer of complexity, hence probably why I'm calling the game out to be the higher end of medium complexity for me. So I'm not going to explain every single mechanic in the game. I'm not great at doing that in these sort of videos. What I would do is just talk a little bit about how I found them as an experience point of view. So we'll first take the fire. So we're talking about musketry fire here, for example. We have our, on this counter here, this unit, we have our fire value, which is the number in the red square there. If you can see that, it's number 2. So its fire value is 2. If I look on my fire table, I roll a d6, just a standard 1d6. This is not a dice chucky game. You're not rolling vast volumes of dice, which for me, for this level of complexity, I like. I like dice, fairly, light rolling games. I roll 1d6, I compare the number with what I've got compared to my fire value, and I inflict step losses on the enemy. The step losses of the enemy, this is probably another, let's pick a French. Here we go. Right. So for example, this French unit here, the step losses number is in the black square, and that's a 5. So that can take 5 step loss. So if I'm inflicting 1 step loss at a time, for example. Now, how they manage step loss, we use these counters here. And you can use these in 2 different ways. One to show if a unit is disorganized, and the second is to show step losses as well. So you're going to be placing those under there to show how many steps either it's got left or how many inflicted, whatever you prefer. That's how I did it anyway. But the actual firing is quite straightforward. There are modifiers, as you would expect. For example, so if the target is in skirmish, or if the target's in a square, etc., etc. Melee is definitely a lot crunchier. So the melee is an odds ratio between the attacker and the defender, which is not unusual for war games. We play loads of war games that uses this mechanic. However, to get those odds requires a little bit of math. So you're going to be looking at the melee value and the number of steps, multiplying them together, adding things up and working things out on the melee table. That does take a little bit of, just takes a little bit of concentration, and at times pen and paper had to come out. So just being honest. So it definitely, in terms of the core mechanics, movement again, very straightforward. So if we're in a column, we can move from hex, rotate slightly, move around, rotate, move around, etc., etc., etc. Again, very straightforward, and you certainly quickly, learn. Here's a good example. The movement rate of this foot unit in column is 5, compared to when it's in line is 3, for example. Perfect example there of the benefits of moving in column compared to moving in line. And it all works all those mechanics individually work quite well. So some concluding thoughts. What do I like about the game? I really like the map, notwithstanding the great big letters. Sorry to go about those again. I'm joking. I like the map a lot. I like the counters a lot. I like the idea that you are setting them into column or line formations. That feels very historically, authentically rich, especially at a tactical level for a Napoleonics game. I enjoyed all that. I can imagine, because I played this game solo, I can imagine how playing 2-player, it would even add another extra sort of tactical dimension to the 2-player game, and I liked all that. I liked all the movement mechanics. I liked the fire mechanics, the melee mechanics. I liked how they did the charges, the artillery. They're all very straightforward. The things that I would call out about the game, what I have found is that the orientating the units in the hexes, as I've mentioned, is just, it's quite physical. You've just got to keep moving them about, and so forth, more than a lot of other types of hex-based war games, I will be honest. I quite enjoyed that for this scale and for this amount of counters. I can imagine and I haven't played all the games in this series, so I don't know, but I can imagine if there were games in the series that had double the amount of counters, that would it could become quite taking quite a lot of time just to actually move the counters about and keeping them neat and tidy, which I've not done a very good job here, I have to say, but keeping them neat and tidy and correctly in their facing of the hexes and thinking about what formation those units are in is absolutely critical. And I enjoyed that, but it definitely does add another layer adds more depth, but also adds a more complexity to the game. So you've got to just bear that in mind. And it is, like I said, especially when you start putting step loss counters and you've got to remove them to increase them and put new ones on, it can be physically just a little fiddly. Is probably the word I would use. But didn't detract from my enjoyment of the game at all. It's just an observation. So all the mechanics I really liked. The actual battle itself, it was quite straightforward, I will be honest with you. I felt like I got a good amount of drama and a good amount of narrative from it. I would definitely, as I said in my AAR I did of the game, I found playing the French more challenging than the opposing side. So there's a lot to learn, I think, with the game, which I really enjoyed. Didn't take a huge amount of time to play. Sort of took me, I don't know, 4 hours, something like that. I think the other thing I do want to mention is that when I bought this game, there were 3 games in print in this series from Legion, Wargames. The quality of the production is very high, and this was the most economically modest priced game. So it's a good one, I think, to sort of, if you're new to the series, I'm thinking about trying it out. This one's a fair one to try, because it's financially cheaper to try the game out and see if it's for you, your cup of tea, as I would like to say. And I definitely feel, having played this, that I think in time I probably will pick up the other 2 that are in print at the moment as well, because I think the game has that level of detail, that rich historical. It definitely feels like I'm playing Napoleonics. It definitely does. And for that, if you love the Napoleonic history, you're playing Napoleonic war games, I think it's worth a closer look at. If you're new to Napoleonic wargaming, hex wargaming, or you've come from playing, say, Command and Colours or something like that, there were probably a few other games I'd recommend before this one, simply because of, in my opinion, some of the complexities of this game compared to some of the other hex and counter based Napoleonic war games that I've got in my collection. But still definitely has its place. So that's probably, so a high recommendation from me. I really enjoyed playing the game. The game has a lot of interesting mechanics. A few niggles for sure, but I'm sure we all do have over some of the war games we love the most. So that's it from me. Thank you for watching. I will put a link to the AAR. I also did an unboxing, so if you want to have a closer look at the components, I have videos for those as well. So yeah, thanks again. Thank you.